Don't unmute until I call you back.
Yeah.
No, no, I cannot.
Right back to get ready to
I cannot.
get some food for dinner.
No. It's not working.
Sometimes it works, sometimes not. Welcome, I am Monona Fay Hoh Yin, the Education and Programs Coordinator here at the Chinese Historical Society. How many of you have been here with us before? Oh, and then how many of you are new to this? So, just to give you a little backdrop, the Chinese Historical Society was founded in 1963, and we're the oldest organization in the United States dedicated to the interpretation, promotion, and sharing of the Chinese American experience. Right? To kind of go along with that, we have a book talk here that obviously will showcase one aspect of the Chinese American experience. To give you a little bit of the bio of the two people who are here today to help us go through this experience, I will read off a little bio. We have Monona Yin, who is Director of Impact and Learning at Borealis Philanthropy from 2004 to 2015. She directed the Capacity Building Initiative of the Four Freedom Funds, which is the national donors collaborative that has invested over $100 million in organizations fighting for the rights, dignity, and inclusion of immigrants in American life. Right? As an activist, Monona is a co-founder and a former staff director of CAV, Organizing Asian Communities in New York City. She has a BA from Yale in American Studies and now lives in Brooklyn with her husband and daughter. Robin Wu is the VP of Education and Community Engagement at the San Francisco Zoo and Gardens. She leads staff in managing adults and youth education and volunteer programs, as well as exhibit interpretation. She is the daughter of immigrants from Shanghai, and Robin was born and raised in New York City. She holds a BA in East Asian Studies from Stanford University and an MBA from UCLA with a concentration in arts management. Robin previously worked at Zero Divide, Compass Point Nonprofit Services, State Bar of California, Chinese for Affirmative Action, and the Chinese Cultural Center here in San Francisco. Robin and her husband are the parents of a daughter and son. Likewise, we also have a petition. We are trying to rename SFO in honor of Mary Lee. So if you want, there are two petitions. And without further ado, we'll get this presentation started. Thank you. And all of you are more than welcome to go see the exhibit after the visit.
Welcome, everybody. This is working. Anyway. Okay. I wanted to mention that this is the first time that I've actually met Monona in person. We communicated on the phone and via email, but we found that we have a lot in common. We have roots in Jiangsu Province and Shanghai, who were both born and raised on the East Coast and have been involved in nonprofits and civil rights advocacy and social justice issues for many years. So I've always been interested in China and my family's history from a young age. So Riding with the Wind resonated with me on many levels. I was so impressed that Faye, with Monona's assistance, had the perseverance to write her first book at not a young age. And at the same time, I completely understand what drove her to do so. I loved how this book was very personal, but also provided great historical context of what was happening in China, Taiwan, and the U.S. during different periods of Faye's life, her husband's life, and her parents' and her in-laws' lives. It was very inspiring to hear how accomplished Faye and her mother were in their professional lives, yet how grounded and strong they were in spite of the hardships that they had to endure. And Faye's close relationship living with her mother-in-law for over 35 years was truly amazing. This book serves as a wonderful legacy for Faye's two So now I'd like to introduce Monona up here. I want to actually tell you a little bit about how the program's going to flow today. We're going to show a video clip of Fay. We've got the technical glitches all fixed now, I think. Monona's going to read 2 passages from the book, and then we'll have a Q&A session after that. So let's get started.
Hi, I'm so happy to see you all. Thank you to William and the Chinese Historical Society, Robin for moderating, Linda and Jeff for always hosting me in San Francisco, and really thank you for those of you who traveled across the bay from the peninsula. I really appreciate your coming today. This was a labor of love, and I love sharing it with other people. In 1991, my mother enrolled in an English writing course. She had been a biochemist for 26 years, but had always loved writing. And through this course, she decided to write about her childhood in China. And she was a natural. She could recall every sight, sound, smell from the 1930s through the 1950s. And over about 20 years, she wrote vignettes that she would just put in a folder and occasionally email to me. So I thought they were great, but we never really got around to doing anything with them. Then in late 2015, my mother had late-stage lymphoma, and she had, unbeknownst to us, a very serious heart condition as well. So she came right to the brink of dying, and the doctors at Memorial Sloan Kettering saved her life. And at that point, we kind of looked at each other and said, you know, it's now or never. We're going to do something. So miraculously, she stayed in the hospital for 6 weeks, rehab for another 6 weeks, and then she moved into my home from Delaware. And it was because we were living together that we could attempt to do this project. It took us almost a year to take these vignettes, to go over every line, to remove the redundancy, and to make it into a little collection. Then we hired a professional editor who said, "You're missing some major pieces," so she had to write more pieces. And for those of you who've read the book, she wasn't able to write about my father until then. It was so painful, she couldn't even write about him until 2016. But the tools for self-publishing are really good, and this was produced through CreateSpace. So if you're interested in self-publishing, do it. It's really doable. Altogether, it took us about a year and a half to pull the book together, and my mom never expected to be a published author, but she's had a really terrific time talking to her readers. So we're going to show a little clip of her last October.
3 generations of my family in China. So the year was 1907. China was still mired in dark ages, and my mother was 6 years old and about to have her feet back. For 1,000 years, Chinese upper and middle class considered a pair of small feet a mark of beauty and refinement. And they practiced the cruel ritual of binding their daughter's feet. The smaller the feet, the more marriageable the girl. And this atrocious process started by wrapping long strips of cloth around the girl's feet. And the wrappings are tightened. In about 2 years' time, the relentless pressure of the cloth feet permanently. Okay, so that is the X-ray of the bound feet. Go back, please. And the women continue to suffer with atrocious pain for the rest of their lives. When you have feet like that, you can't walk from any distance, and that made the women more dependent in many ways. So when my mother's time came, she told me that her feet felt like they were being grilled on a hot skillet. And my mother was a fighter. Even at 6 years old, she did not take the treatment in a docile way. She cried and she raged and she begged. And after about a month of that, my grandfather, her father, couldn't stand the protests anymore. So he unwound all the stripping from my mother's feet and throw them into the kitchen stove. And my grandmother then wailed, "Oh, nobody's going to marry our daughter now." And to which my grandfather answered solemnly, "That's okay. She can go to school, learn to be a teacher, and support herself." Another one. Okay, this is my mother and her mother. And my grandmother had small feet, and my mother had natural feet. That gave her a lot of freedom. So after my grandfather burned the wrapping, she went to school. She did exactly what my grandfather said. And she did so well in her local high school. She graduated with honor, was invited to stay to teach. But my mother wanted to go to a college, a teacher's college in the big city, Shanghai. Again, she had to fight against her parents and also the prevailing belief that higher education was not needed for girls. At this time, she even waged a hunger strike until her parents relented. So from Shanghai, she did so well that her college then sent her to the U.S. as one of the first few Chinese female students to study in this country. So my mother got a modern education in the University of Wisconsin. She then returned to China. And by combining the best of East and West, she became a pioneering educator for the next 72 long years. She worked, taught, and administered at all levels of the institution in China. And her biggest contribution was training 16,000 elementary school teachers in Taiwan. These teachers were guided to develop the child in mind and body, to nurture the whole child. And of course, these teachers then taught many thousands of students, some of which become community leaders. When my mother died in '96, she was widely known in Taiwan as the mother of elementary education and teachers of teachers.
So that story is actually fairly well known in Taiwan. My grandmother had a biographer beauties of this book for me was telling the other stories of my grandmother's generation. And the message is very clear that in the early 20th century, your life chances as a female were so determined by your family's values, your own willingness to fight, and sheer luck. And this grandmother had all three going for her. But my other grandmother really suffered a much more difficult fate. And I'm going to read you a passage about her. This was the grandmother who raised me in Delaware. She came over in '63 and lived with us until her death in '97. The year after she was married, in 1930, this is where I'm going to start reading it, and her given name is Yue Fang. When Yue Fang delivered a healthy baby boy, Ted, my father, the whole family was joyous. Then Long, her husband, was away on a business trip at the time. In his eagerness to join his wife and new baby, he arranged to fly home. Aviation was then a new venture in China. He happened to be on the same plane with an important Chinese official whose elaborate departure was accompanied by an army band. After the plane took off, it circled back for a farewell salute to the dignitaries on the ground. The pilot's inexperience caused him to lose control, and the plane crashed. Then Long and a score of others were killed instantly. The family didn't tell Yue Fang of the accident until weeks later, when her suspicion led her to burst out of her lying-in room. In her shock, she sat in front of the fire for hours every day, not eating and not feeding her baby, who was eventually cared for by a wet nurse. The family was overwhelmed with grief, but Yue Fang alone suffered the hellish life of a widow from that moment on. Her life, as decreed by the customs of upper-class Chinese society at that time, forbade all joy and color. She lived with her son Ted in the Big Yin household, a crimeless prisoner with an endless sentence. In old China, widows, particularly the younger ones, were considered unlucky, as if they had caused the deaths of their husbands through their faults, their bitter fate. I think all the mourning rituals were designed to torture the widows, thereafter called the one yet to die. Yue Fang wore mourning black for 3 years. For the first 49 days, she was required to call out Ben Long's name at every mealtime. The custom was to store his sealed coffin for a year before burial, and Yue Fang had to visit his coffin every 7 days. A widow certainly felt miserable enough, but people expected her to be abject, to show no interest in life at all. Any sign of levity from a recent widow would be shocking, and Yue Fang, at the tender age of 24, lived a life, in her own words, quote, never short of food or money, but a living hell nonetheless. Her only respite was to return with Ted to her father's home, where she could relax a little and be herself. Grandmother Yin, that was her mean mother-in-law, didn't like that arrangement much, but acquiesced because grandfather's son happened to be one of the few people she could not intimidate. At the end of the 3 years, grandfather's son had a dress made for his daughter, Yue Fang. It was gray with splashes of small pink flowers on it. That was the beginning of her shedding her blacks. Again, Grandmother Yin couldn't object, since her own father had given the dress to Yue Fang. So, I mean, it's amazing to me that my grandmother retained her spirit and was a really, she was a great presence in our lives. The second passage I want to read to you is about my great aunt, who in that round portrait you might have seen next to my grandmother. She was the baby of the family, much younger than her sister, and unluckily as a baby had smallpox, and she was deformed with lots of pox on her face, and she endured many operations to try to to make it less noticeable. And for that reason, she never married. But she had a great career as a dance professor, and she lived with my grandparents her entire adult life. So the three of them were my mother's parents. She always had three parents. And after my grandfather died, the two sisters continued living together and were, again, another kind of unconventional couple in this book. So towards the end of my grandmother's life, my mother was returning to Taiwan every couple of months. And there she would visit her great aunt and her mother. Okay, so this is my mother's voice. Father died in 1975 when mother was in her 70s, and she was inconsolable. I.E. became mother's rescuer. She slept in the same bed with mother so she could wake her from the occasional nightmare. I.E. accompanied mother wherever she went so she didn't have to hail a taxi in Taipei's congested streets after Lao He retired. I.E. looked after mother in every daily task until mother was strong enough to go back to her beloved teaching, giving her another 20 years of a productive career. When mother's health declined in her 90s, I.E. gladly took up the brunt of caregiving for mother, even though she was in her 80s herself. By the time mother died at the age of 96, the two sisters had lived together for more than 80 years. The decline of mother's health was slow but inexorable and very painful for me to witness. I increased my visits to Taiwan. The bittersweetness of those times remains etched in my mind. My emotions were a jumbled mess. I was distraught over mother's helpless condition, anxious to make every minute count, and guilty that I couldn't be there more. Because of mother's frailty, we stayed home a lot. One night, we were given tickets to a rare performance by a Chinese opera troupe from Beijing. Mother wisely predicted that getting a taxi afterward would be difficult and decided not to go. So I.E. and I went. The troupe lived up to its reputation and more. The singing and acting were superb. The composer made ingenious puns, and the result was clever and at times hilarious. The performance had the audience laughing, howling, and crying at the same time. I.E. and I kept saying to each other, "Oh, if only mother had come with us." After the show, a summer storm raged outside. Sure enough, we waited half an hour, but failed to get a taxi or even get near a bus. I.E. remembered there was a long-distance bus stop 2 blocks away and thought it might be easier to catch. Dripping wet, even with our umbrellas, we sloshed through the mud and water and finally caught that bus after a little wait. While we were shivering in our wet clothes, we sang a different tune and kept repeating to each other, "Thank goodness mother didn't come." We eventually got off the bus in a less congested area, hailed a taxi, and got home after 1 a.m. Mother had waited worriedly in the living room for hours. Her eyes lit up and a big smile broke out when she saw us. With outstretched arms, she said, "Oh, you angels from heaven." I.E. and I took hot showers and devoured the leftovers mother had warmed up for us. We described the opera and our odyssey to mother with great excitement, interrupting each other to fill in the details. Basking in her relief and joy at seeing us safely home, mother listened, laughed, and made jokes. That night remained a bright spot in my memory of those gray days of mother's decline. It was as if time had rolled back and mother and I were young again. So, I think the other thing that I discovered, even though I knew a lot about my family before we did the book, I really saw how the love that the individual members of the family had was kind of like a force field that protected them through really difficult times of loss or dislocation. And it gave me a much stronger sense that that is in fact the legacy that I'm giving to my children, my daughter. So I'm going to turn it back to Robin, and we're going to do a little Q&A. And as some of you saw when we came in, we're going to attempt something very difficult. We're trying to patch an 86-year-old into the room with a video chat program.
Yeah, as some of you have read the book, when I read the book, of course I was hearing various parts of it, but
Okay, so unmute the microphone. Everybody can see you now. And I'm going to turn on the computer so you can see us. Can you talk so we can see if the mic's on?
What?
We can hear you.
Okay, we can hear you. We can hear you. That's perfect.
Yeah, what? Okay.
Can you see us?
Yes.
Okay, so, great, it's working.
Okay, so do we have any questions from the audience? Well,
Somebody better ask her a question. This was really hard.
do you have a question?
I'll just say thank you very much for giving us this story of 3 and 4. Hi, Faye.
Just talk into it.
Hi, Faye. I'm here.
Hi.
Hi. I totally enjoyed Monona's introduction to your book and think it's so wonderful as an 85-year-old that I am that you're doing this, and thank you for it.
Thank you so much. And I thank you all for inviting me to join this venture. This high-tech is so interesting, but a little scary for an 86-year-old, actually. I just turned 86.
Hi, Faye. I'm curious.
Tell her who you are.
I met you a long time ago. I'm a friend of Monona's. I used to live in New York. I'm Annette Holloway.
Yeah.
I'm curious what, for people who read your book, what's the part that's the most important to you? What's the part that you really want them to get?
Did everybody hear that?
It's so interesting. I never planned to write a book. As I said, I wrote it for assignment in my English writing class. And afterwards, I thought, whoa, I did talk about the women in my family a lot. And all 3 of them, my mother, my mother-in-law, and my aunt, are all strong women. And then I also thought how wonderful it is to have the love in the family. The love was given by the parents to the children in whatever way they thought was best. It may not be the best, but nevertheless, the love was there, and it became the strength for the children in the 3 generations I wrote about. And these are the things that kind of jumped out at me after I finished the book. I didn't plan it.
Right. It's funny, that's just what Monona said. She was exactly what she said too. So thank you very much. Pass it over to her. Oh, I thought you had a question.
Judy, take it.
Hi, this is Christina's son.
Hi.
My parents were friends of yours back in Wilmington, Amy and Wei Sung, and I wish
Oh,
I wish they could have been here today to see you. You look great.
yeah. How are they?
Well, they passed away, but I'm sure that the stories that you have in your book will probably be similar in some ways to what they experienced. Yeah.
Yeah.
You look really good, and I look forward to reading your book.
Well, thank you very much. That took 3 times as long as War and Peace. It took me 20 years to finish it.
Hi, this is Judy Hatcher. I'm a great friend of Monona.
Hi.
And as I understand it, you've spent some years sharing vignettes, writing them down, and sharing them with Monona over email. Were there some things that were actually hard for you to share with Monona specifically about your life or your
I'm sorry, I can't hear you too well.
Okay.
Can you repeat
Yes.
it?
I understand that some things flowed for you very well when you were writing and came very easily. And I was wondering if some things are particularly harder for you to share, particularly to share with Monona and people within the family.
Well, the hardest part was about my husband, his death, and then later letter to Ted. I didn't write this until I was in Sloan Kettering. I thought I was going to die in Sloan Kettering, and then I realized I'd better finish it before I quit. So I pushed through that. That was very difficult for me. And as I said, it took 20 long years to write different pieces, but I had fun doing it. And I just left the sad part out of it. I was glad that finally I thought that he was so much a part of our life, I couldn't leave him out. But it was painful.
Hello. Wait, is it the wrong place? Let me see this. Oh, like this?
No, don't touch anything.
Oh, wait. I don't know what I was supposed to press.
You just speak. Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm Lawrence Poon. I think most of the women from my mom's family are relatively strong, like yours too. And I think I can relate to your family a little bit. But what was the last time you went to Taiwan? It's been. I would love to go see Taiwan myself.
Well, it changed quite a bit, and in fact, for eating and sightseeing, Taiwan is fantastic. It's sort of getting more Americanized. I think the whole world's getting more Americanized, and it is still a place where you can find some of the old virtues that are revered in Chinese tradition. I'm so proud of our old virtues, the honoring your parents, work hard, and be generous and be kind to others. These are all old Chinese values that we grew up learning, but a lot of it is gone.
Hi, this is Linda Fishman. Monona, Heidi, and I used to hang out together, if you remember, in high school. You look terrific, by the way. My question to you is, I have a dad who's 91, still alive, also an immigrant. What motivated you, and what ideas do you have that could help me motivate him to write his story? Because it is a beautiful story, and something that should be told before he passes.
What motivated me?
Yes.
Well, the deadline was what motivated me. Science, all my years in the U.S. So I still have a lot of trouble with the English grammar. The tenses, I have to struggle that. So after I retired, I signed up for this writing said, write about what you know. And that, the one area that I know very well is my family. And all the stories I heard over and over again from my parents about their parents. And so there was no, it's a no-brainer. I couldn't write about anything else. I'm the kind of writer that can't write about anything that didn't happen. You know, I cannot create anything. But I thought my family stories are really worth telling. And my maternal grandfather, I think of him as a classic liberal. You know, at that time, in the early 1920s, 1900s, and he had the far side to help my mom to get out from the dark clouds of the Chinese tradition. And I just thought he was unbelievable. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, oh yeah, yes.
Okay. And my dad was also an unusual man. He had a very successful career his whole life, but he was fully supportive of my mom during their long married life. And that was very unusual. You know, at the time when my mother started working, most of the wives are stay-home wives. And so my mom was lucky. You know, she had a good father and a good husband that kind of helped her to move, to achieve all that she did. And my poor mother-in-law didn't really have the luck. And she was very intelligent, very smart, hardworking, but she wasn't allowed to have the education.
Mom, I'm going to answer, the second part of her question was about how to motivate her own father to write his story.
I'm sorry, I didn't
No,
hear
that's
that.
okay, that's okay. I'm going to take
You know, this is very interesting. I have several friends who had amazing lives, immigrants. You know, one was a Jewish man that came out from Hungary, and for some reason they did not want to tell their story. And I don't know how you can go about doing that other than bugging him, I guess, or have him tell you the story and you would write it down.
That's what I was going to say. And also, I think a good way to do it is to have him either tell you or your kids on video and to have it be a conversation. And just kind of like bite off a small piece and break the ice that way. And then every time you have a holiday, just get another one and just kind of accumulate it. But I've recently become aware that there's a big genealogical community of people who spend a lot of their free time recording their family history and finding documents. Actually, the exhibit upstairs is all about that. So if you go online, actually there are a lot of resources like templates and things to help you. And also, give them the book. I'm telling you, it's actually very inspiring. To my older friends who read it, like one of them is a writer, and her first reaction was, oh my God, why am I not doing this? So,
We go back to Wilmington in 2 weeks.
Oh, great.
But I also like that she took a writing class. Tell her, I mean,
Oh,
at this
yeah.
age, to
Well,
then.
she wasn't this age. She
Oh,
was
okay.
in her 60s.
Oh, okay, so it was 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, I've had many people, some of my friends, some that I didn't know at all, after they read my memoir, they started telling me about their own family.
Yeah.
And one man wrote a long story. So I think everyone has a story in them,
Yeah.
and it just said, you have to coax it out.
Right.
And I'm sure my book would not have materialized if I wasn't near death. And Monona was the one that pushed me, and then she helped me a lot. She corrected my English that didn't sound right and all that. So that's important. So I think that if you could record your father's story and then somehow write it down and let him read it, and he may be amazed what stories he has.
Thank you.
And even though everybody has a story, I think the first generation immigrants have a much more interesting story than those of us who came after. So.
Are there other questions? Should have a quick question. Faye? Yeah. I'd like to ask this question to both you and Monona. I know you were very collaborative as you spent that year and a half kind of fine-tuning, editing the book. Like, were there any memorable moments that were challenging or particularly rewarding? Anything that comes to mind that you'd like to share with us?
Should I go first? Yeah. I think it was a real blessing. You know, Monona and I have always been close, but this deepened our relationship. And when I first came back from the hospital, I stayed in her house for like 2-3 months, and she urged me to write it. And then she had gone to Taiwan, so she knew a lot of the story because she lived with my mom and my aunt. So almost every day or every other day, we would sit on the kitchen table and we would sort of pass our memories back and forth, checking this and that. And some of the things we remember differently. We have to sort of figure out the details. And then she was very good at details. She was the one that assembled all the family tree and all that. Then I got hold of my cousin in Taiwan, and lo and behold, we had like 15 generations of family trees sitting there. So it was just a wonderful experience. We discussed everything about the content, the photographs we want, and the different stories and the what to leave in there. I think you should all work with your mother or your daughter. It's a wonderful experience. It's a real blessing. And for some reason, I think women tend, maybe I'm overgeneralizing it. I certainly think that we are the keeper of our family history because my son not much about the details. I cared a lot. So my apology to the men in the room.
Okay. That's great. Anybody else? So maybe we'll just wind it up then, and those of you that have books or would like to purchase, that would be great. They're on sale over there. Monona will autograph them, and they are $10 a copy, normally $15, but getting a discount then. Cash or Venmo. Venmo. So thank you so much for coming today. It's been a lot of fun.
Thanks, Mom.
Thank you.
We're going to hang up now.
This is really a great effort on
All right.
Yeah, would have been a lot different.
It's like $10 each. I was wondering if this is going to be translated into Chinese because
Only cash? You don't have credit card.
I don't have credit card, but,
Can I pay in the front? I mean the
no.
I was getting curious if this is going to be like, oh yeah, I can translate it into Chinese.
You know, we looked into it, we don't think there's an audience. Because the Chinese people know about this. It's, I don't know.
So that's why it's on English.
You can take the copyright to translate it.
That'd be nice. Well, that would have been a weird question to ask, but oh well.
No, not really.
Just a couple of steps.
Yeah.
Well, this is gonna be a short one, so hey, it's been really fun. It's not bad. So. Oh yeah. So I'll say some of the buyers of this, they wanted to see it signed, but I don't have space. I would love to get the book, but it's just I don't have space. Looks good though. But I'll end it again. There's some sizable audience, so not bad. So I'm gonna have to end this right now before I chat.